self-powering electrolyzers. Now here's a topic we've talked about a few times on this channel. So welcome back to yet another experiment, but this time exploring with the new advantages that we have with automation. So here we go. We're going to check this out. We're going to be testing one of the classic methods to create a self-powering electrolyzer system, and then we're going to be comparing that to the door method. And this is in result or response to several comments I was left here on a couple of my videos. So Death of Pasta was asking about whether or not moving gases with doors would potentially increase the efficiency or kind of make it run for longer periods of time. And also Casual Raz down here was asking about the efficiency of that sort of polling method. So when you open up those doors, it creates a vacuum, letting that electrolyzer run. And electrolyzers are one of these pieces of equipment that overpressurize, and that's when they stop working. So what I've set up here is an experiment where I have the exact same volume of oxygen right over here. So everything's starting off at 100 grams of oxygen here, and then I've also put hydrogen up top. So I've already seeded this to work and work properly. And we're doing this at the beginning of cycle 2. I've set this up about the best I could do. And the volume of oxygen space over here is the same volume that we have over here on the left. But this one's using the automated door pump system. So that was right back here in a previous episode. So what happens here is the gas that enters right here gets pulled into these two doors, and this area right here is a vacuum. And then this door closes, and it closes in order to, this one closes and then that one kind of closes. And all this does is pump gas up. And this is a supercompressor, so we can compress the crap out of any sort of oxygen or gas that we want inside the space. We've even done it with liquid. So the door supercompressors are totally legit, and they continue to work now that the game is actually released in the current upgrade build of the game. So this works, and what I've done is I've set this up very simply to kind of show you the automation over here. So those of you that are looking to these videos as more of a tutorial, that's what I'm going to try to point that in more of a direction towards it's easy to understand. So what I have here is an AND gate, so I'll be able to turn the signal switch on, and then this signal here just continues to go around and around, and it operates these doors. So we use a couple of buffer gates and then a filter gate to kind of arrange these doors. You can just take a quick look at that to see exactly what it does. The whole purpose of this experiment, though, is to set this up and to run it through a cycle to see how quickly either of these systems are producing oxygen into this space right here. So we're going to get a rate. And I think what we'll see is a difference in rates, but we'll also see some advantages and disadvantages of using the door pump as compared to a more conventional system. So what I have here is an Atmos sensor placed in the same spot, and a 10% clock sensor here that will be closing as 10% increments, and that's when I'll take my readings and we'll chart that sucker out. So there was also another recommendation to use the time of day sensors to do this exact sort of thing. So boom, very serious. Let's get to it. And I think this is going to be a really good experiment. Alright, so let's run this experiment. I'm going to enable both of these pumps at the exact same time. I'm also going to turn on the door compressor as well to make sure everything's running. And I'm just going to rate this out, at 10% increments here. So right off the bat, we can see things starting to run. The best overlay to kind of view what's going on here is going to be using the oxygen overlay. And we can see just how much oxygen we have, how much is kind of moving around. And it'll be interesting to see how things are going to kind of run throughout this cycle. Now there's many different arrangements that we can use for the electrolyzer system over here on the right. Some people actually dip this thing in a little bit of liquid to trick it into running constantly. But what we can see here right off the bat is that this thing is not stalling out because it's not overpressurizing. Electrolyzers do overpressurize, and that's what they end up stalling out. So what we can see here is this hits max gas pressure and it turns off quite a bit. So it's not running as fast as what we're seeing over here on the right. The real question is, how is this going to work when we compare to how much hydrogen we're actually producing? So I don't know. There's a lot of different little elements that are in this experiment, but right off the bat here, as we kind of move through the very early low pressurized stage of this test, we can see that the amount of oxygen being produced on the right is far higher than what we are getting over here on the left. All right, so the first door closed, and we're at about 10% here. So the oxygen produced on the right, look at that, 746 grams. Over here on the left, only 220. The hydrogen, though, on the right, look at that, it's up to 505 grams. Over here on the left, though, we're at 286. Okay, so I'm going to let this run just a little bit faster here. You can see just how much oxygen we have on the right compared to the left. It's huge. I cannot take my eye off this door, though. It's very easy. Like I said, it's very easy to like lose focus when you're commenting, and that's your only indication. Maybe this has to be a light bulb or something. Okay, what we have here on the right, look at this. 1,084. It's huge. Over here on the left, though, that's way lower at 483. What we're seeing, though, is that there isn't an area of like super high pressure, kind of like what we get over here with this electrolyzer setup. Look at that, 1,300. This area has always been pretty much high pressure. You've seen that from this overlay. Okay, so now that we're getting closer to 30% within this cycle, we can see that we're starting to overpressurize on the electrolyzer that's, you know, on the conventional system over here. So things are going to start to slow down. But what we should see using that door system is that this thing is going to stay consistent. And it'll be interesting to see just how consistent it actually is. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to let both of these systems sit. That'll let the pressure levels even out. And then I can do some math to figure out exactly just how much, you know, total oxygen we have and compare that to how much hydrogen we are able to produce within that space. That'll give us some numbers to work with. All right, let's take a look at these results. So for the open air electrolyzer system, we can see that these numbers over here are represented in blue and red on this graph. And then the door pump setup right there, that's represented in yellow and green. So we can see a major difference right off the bat that in a low pressure system, the kind of open to elements, you know, the whatever system that isn't using the door pumps will very, very quickly go from 100 grams of oxygen right here, you know, way up very, very quickly. However, it tends to top out right around 1,200, 1,300, and, you know, won't really go above 1,400 at all. You can see that, you know, it very, very quickly went from right down here, even though we don't have a point, but it went up right like that. And the amount of hydrogen that was produced also only went up and was right over there. So it actually didn't produce more power. So what really gets interesting here is that what we see is that the door pump system continues to go up almost linearly, you know, throughout the entire cycle right there. And the amount of hydrogen also continues to go up pretty close to linearly as well. So those are continuing to go up and produce, and what we end up with is a completely different situation for using the electrolyzer. So in an open base, more or less, when you want to just continuously fill your base with oxygen, there's really no reason to use a door pump system because the rate at which oxygen can be produced in kind of a open separator system, whether you're using a hydro hood or whatever else you're using, you know, is going to be much, much quicker than, you know, using those doors to separate that out. However, this is really only using 3 doors right there. You could make an experiment with this with more doors to see what kind of a difference that makes. However, at the end of the day, what we end up with is a question. Is it more or less efficient? So what I did here is I totaled up the amount of oxygen in both of these systems that was produced and then divided that out by the total amount of hydrogen, compensating for the slightly differences in volumes and the initial starting numbers. So I did all the math to make sure it was right. And what we end up here with is a 7.1 grams of oxygen to 1 gram of hydrogen, which is pretty close to the 8-to-1 that it continuously produces or says it's going to produce. Because what we've seen here in the past over the last several videos of exploring these electrolyzers is that a little bit of hydrogen tends to get deleted out because it doesn't really have any space to go when there's oxygen around. So we've done a lot of development to make that as efficient as it is, which is 7.1, and those two systems right now are equal as far as how efficient they are. The real big difference, though, is in the total amount of power that is contained within the amount of hydrogen that's created. And what we see here is that there's a total amount of 61 kilojoules out of that open electrolyzer system right there. However, 174 kilojoules of power on the door pump system right there, basically because it can continue to run throughout the entire day without stalling out once we've topped off the oxygen. So there's a big difference right there. And not to mention, if you want to build up a lot of hydrogen for use, in different systems as far as thermally conductive systems and all of that fun stuff, it seems like this is a very good reason to use a door pump system for your electrolyzer as compared to the open pump system. And as we know, door pumps, since they don't use power, automatically are going to be more efficient than just using gas pumps because those consume a lot of power. So that's pretty sweet, and it continuously, it works for right now. The amount of kilojoules that was used in both of these setups over here on the open to environment system is 5.2 kilojoules, and then on the other one is 14.7 kilojoules used in the door pump setup. So you can see that the total yield from the door pump system right there, look at that, that's 160 kilojoules, or just about. Let's go ahead and just take that number minus that number. Bam, 159.7 kilojoules that you're getting out of this. So hey man, it works. And it's also from the absolute, the design of this thing this is very easy to scale, right? You could just add more doors and more electrolyzers, and all you have to do is kind of move your wall out. So this should scale very easily. If you want to just convert water into power, then boom, there you go. And you have a ton of extra oxygen that you can just use for whatever, right? So that's going to be very useful. I feel like, I might set one of these up in my mega base just to start, producing oxygen for my exosuit setups right there. And this looks a little bit different because I ran the experiment several times to make sure I got my numbers right. But yeah, I like it. Is it in a conventional base? Is it, better for oxygen production? No, I mean, I wouldn't use it for that. You can still set this up to be self-powering, and, it's a complete win for, an oxygen setup. But over here on the left, bam. I mean, if you got other plans for using electrolyzers, this door pump thing is giving you another option. I think this was a really awesome experiment, so thank you guys for recommending down there in the comment section below. If you got other things you want me to try, feel free to leave them down there. Maybe it'll make it into a video at some point. Hopefully you guys have found this video somewhat informative or helpful, and thank you guys for watching. If I've earned your subscription, then thank you so much for that. Have a great day, guys. Brothgar out.